So how did you like the opening songs, and did you like those?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good choices? Okay, good. Not about me, I just, feedback. We're just getting an assessment. We're doing a needs assessment. No. Okay. So I selected Hineni as our meditation chant this morning. And the reason I did that was because I wanted to speak about Moses. Moses. Is that from a cartoon or something? That little voice thing? All right, anyway. I got this idea for the sermon from one of our seminarians, Sacred Journey Interfaith Seminary. One of our seminarians had actually asked me a question. And so shout out to Anne, who gave me this idea for today's sermon. She said, isn't it true that Moses, after leading the people for 40 years through the desert, wandering, and all of the Israelites, and they're whining and they're complaining, and no matter what God did for them, no matter what divine grace God bestowed upon them, and the miracles, they still complained every time things didn't go their way. Moses had it up to here. Everybody knows who Moses is, right? I mean, I don't want to make any assumptions that we all know who Moses is. And it's a really long story. His story is so cool and interesting because he was really Hebrew, raised as an Egyptian. And later on, he has a spiritual awakening, recognizing that the Hebrews who were enslaved, the Israelites who were enslaved, needed to be freed. And then he goes up to the mountain and he has a burning bush experience, right? The bush is on fire and God speaks, and then later on he asks, who are you? And God says, I am that I am, which is in the Hindu, in Sanskrit, in the Vedic tradition, Tatvamasi, I am that. I am that. And so, the rest of the story where the 10 Commandments are given, and it goes back down to the people, and he goes to Pharaoh, and I'm going back and forth, but ultimately, if you saw the 10 Commandments, the movie, you know how it goes, right? So Pharaoh eventually, after 10 plagues, lets the people go. And then he changes his mind. And then there's a crossroads at the Red Sea, and the Red Sea parts, and there's another miracle. There's just miracle after miracle after miracle. Divine grace, divine grace. Now, I know there's scientists in the room, right? Raise your hand, there's scientists here. So there's scientific explanations for all of this, and all you got to do is just watch CNN or History Channel or Nat Geo or something, and you'll figure out, eventually how divine grace kind of operates through science, and that kind of explains why all that went down. And I'm not really tied into too much the literal here, because what I want to really talk about is the mystical nature of this big, giant kind of rip-off of Moses, where Moses gets ripped off. Because Moses, does all of this listening to the people, right? And every time the people complain, there's no food, Moses prays, God gives them manna, they're still not satisfied, right? They complain that there's no water, so he goes and he talks to God, and God tells him what to do with the staff and the hitting of the rock, and water is formed. Complaining and whining and complaining and whining. And God's grace, God's grace, God's grace. Complaining and whining. Who does this remind us of? Do we not do that? Do we not do that on a regular basis? Call 911, right? Well, Moses has had it 40 years. I want you to imagine, as a spiritual leader, directing, and helping to lead and guide these people who are just whining and complaining, and God gives them miracles, and they're still whining. So Moses can't bear it. He can't bear it, right? So this is one point, and we're getting towards the end of the story now. This is around Numbers 20. So, you figure we've already gone through Genesis and Exodus, and now we're in Numbers already, in the Old Testament. In the Christian Old Testament, known as the Torah for the Jewish people. And so what happens? Wow, so he comes back down, and God tells him about the rock. He reminds him, don't forget, use your staff. Use your words. No, use your staff and hit the rock. And so Moses does it, and he does it with anger. And P.S. back at the ranch, there was also a little temper tantrum that Moses had by throwing the Ten Commandments and breaking them. And the crowd went, when he did that. The Ten Commandments. Oh my God. So there was this anger in Moses, and you can't help but you can't help but feel bad for Moses. I don't know, you just feel bad for this guy. He's trying so hard to do the right thing. And he keeps on trying so hard to lead the people. And he's trying so hard to be that chariot I talked about in the chant. He's a chariot. He's constantly transforming himself and evolving into this higher consciousness of a being, right? And he makes himself this chariot for the divine presence. It's the only reason that the miracles work. It ain't coming from Moses. See, Pharaoh's magicians duplicated a lot of stuff that was going on that Moses kept doing, right? When you receive Reiki, when you give and receive Reiki, which is healing energy, right? It's not the practitioner. It's Reiki. Like Reiki just is. And you hear some people say, oh, that person gives really good Reiki. It's like, okay, well, that's interesting. And that might be true. However, here's the deal. We're instruments. Moses forgot that, right? So Moses got annoyed. Moses got pissed. Can you say pissed in church? Moses got pissed. Moses had a tantrum. Moses got mad because the people were annoying him. Because they kept on whining and complaining and they were never satisfied. The Buddha talked about this. He said, life is suffering. It's the first noble truth. And he said, there's a cause for that. Why do we suffer? Because we're craving and clinging after that which can never be satisfied. That's the kind of mystical significance of the whining and the complaint. That's us. And that's our ego. So when we're in that ego space, not in that divine space, when we're in the ego space, and in recovery we talk about the disease of addiction. The disease of addiction, which is in our mind, right? So it's the, you never have enough. One is too many and 1,000 is never enough, And that's true of people who are addicts and people who aren't addicts. P.S. back at the ranch. There's a great song, I don't know if Nora knows it, but there's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, dear Liza. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, a hole. That hole, that's the craving and the clinging. That's the craving and the clinging that the Buddha was talking about. That we're always seeking after this or that, people, places, things. If I only had milk for my cereal, because we didn't have any this morning, right? No milk, you forgot the milk. So, if only we had the milk, it would have been perfect, right? But isn't that us all the time? And isn't that the Israelites? You see, it was never enough. Even though there was manna, this bread, what? Bread from heaven that came, right? And of course, where are the scientists in the room? Raise your hand again. Very good. Okay. There's an explanation. You know what? Hey, guess what? It doesn't matter, because when they were hungry, they ate something, right? And it was like, swing. They got something which was divine grace. But it was never enough. It was a hole in the bucket. Now this annoyed Moses. Because Moses is like, do you not see what I've done? And then he got caught up because he thought what I have done. And he takes the staff and he hits the rock in anger and says, there, I did it for you. Again, there's water. Drink it. Oh, and God got mad. That's what the Old Testament says. Now, I know that there's some people in the room that are cringing from the old, the Judeo-Christian God that is so punishing God. Like God is like this nun, like Sister Mary, Sister Mary Miserable, who is, gonna punish you. Go to your room. You're in a timeout. Like that's kind of like what you get from the story. Because here's what happens. Here's what God does. God gets so mad that he doesn't allow Moses into the promised land. When they finally get there, after 40 years of wandering and being lost, they finally get there. They see the sign. It says, Canaan, 5 miles. Last rest stop, 20 miles from now. You know, they've been wandering, right? That's us, the desert. We're in the desert. We're here in this embodiment, and we're wandering. You know, we're seeking. We're seeking after what? What's the promised land? The promised land is enlightenment. Now, maybe this, you know, for the Hindus, for the Buddhists, for the Jains, for the Sikhs, you know, enlightenment is a word that's used. What does enlightenment mean? It really means higher consciousness. That's what it means. It means higher consciousness. Remember who you really are. Remember your true nature. Remember that you are the divine presence. Remember that you are Shekhinah. That you're not this body. Because this is the hole in the bucket, dear Eliza. Right? This is going to perish. It's going to go away. We know that. Metaphysical principles teach us that the spirit still lives on. Right? So the wandering in the desert piece could be 2 things. One, it could be this embodiment. This embodiment, which sometimes we feel lost. How many times do you ever feel lost? You're on your path, but you still feel lost. No? You don't want to vote? Okay. No problem. Answer to yourselves. I know that I feel lost at times. And then I realize that it's because I forgot to make the connection with the divine presence. Because I think I'm doing it. See, Moses thought he was doing it. Now, whether or not he really was banished from the promised land, and those of us who are literalists and fundamentalists, please have a ball with the literal translation of it. I would like to look at the mystical translation of this. So it's neither here nor there that he entered Canaan or not, and that he died on the mountain when he was 500 years old or something like that. That's neither here nor there. The point is that when I go into ego, when I'm in ego space, I lose the promised land. What's the promised land? Inner peace. Happy, joyous, free, perspective, state of mind, higher consciousness, higher frequency. I can't be a good instrument then, see? So Moses did the water. Anyway, he hit the rock with the staff. The water came out. Ooh, the people were happy. But something worse occurred here. And that was that he lost his spiritual connection. Now the good news is that despite the story, you know, he loses his prize, his eye on the prize, which was Canaan. Guess what? Aaron and his sidekick also didn't get to go. So like the only people that got to go were the Israelites into Canaan. You know, whatever. That's not the point. The point is the mystical significance. Canaan is here. Promised land is here. And whether I'm an Israelite or a Moses in the story, all of them represent ego. They all represent the struggle of ego and the higher self. So when the blessed self is connected, and we engage it, like if we were in a video game and we had to engage something, we would engage that divine presence. We would engage it. We would become aware of it. We would be mindful of it and say, I am a chariot for the divine presence. I'm not like all that and a bag of chips. See, because I want to manipulate. That's what Moses did at the end. He wanted to manipulate and think that the power was coming from him. But it all came from the temper that he had. He lost his temper. So I want to speak to that. You don't have to vote. You can vote silently. How many of you get annoyed by people? Oh, okay. We get annoyed by people all the time because people don't do what we want them to do. So we have expectations. Right? The expectation about the promised land is that it's over there, and I have to get to it. Promised land is here. Jesus said that. Kingdom of heaven is within. Buddha said that when recognize that life is suffering and the cause of it is what? Craving and clinging. And I detach from that. When I detach from that, and I don't get attached, I bought a new car. Remember my Prius?
Mm-hmm.
Had to put the Prius down. Sorry. got a new car. So happy. Oh, it's so shiny. It's so new. It looks so good. It's black, so it kind of picks up a lot of dirt and spots. And so the minute it rains, I get out there with a towel. I start wiping it down, you know. But it's raining a lot, so it's very frustrating because, you know, I can't keep up with the towels and drying them and then trying to dry. I'm exaggerating a little bit for effect, but truth be told, I get upset when I see a spot. That's the hole in the bucket. That's the attachment, right? So what I want to speak about is expectations of others, expectations of people, places, and things, and when I have that, and I have a destination in mind rather than the process. See, that's the beauty of the whole story of Moses and the Israelites and the whole thing. The beauty of it was the process, not the destination. The beauty of this was what lessons can we learn from it as seekers? Because we're seekers. We're seeking the promised land, which is enlightenment. We're seeking peace of mind. We're seeking to be happy, joyous, and free. And so the 40 years in the desert is really life on life's terms. The good, the bad, and the ugly. When I connect with the divine presence and take ego out of the way, and let's not forget those 10 commandments. I know that we all learned this in school pretty much, the 10 commandments, but I would go further and say they're really golden rules. If you had to really sum up the 10 commandments into 4 words, Swami Shivananda would say, be good, do good. The path of yoga, the Eightfold Path, the 10 commandments, the metaphysical principles, allow us the tools that we need to have a little bit more tolerance, a little bit more patience, recognize that everybody is doing the best they can, given the fact that they're in this embodiment. And we can relax then in that. We can relax then in knowing that when I allow others to be their chariot, and I'm my chariot, the divine presence can just unfold. And therein truly lies the promised land.